When we think about India's founding identity on the global stage, it's really common to picture the nonviolent pacifism of Mahatma Gandhi, or maybe the high-minded, deeply moral statesmanship of Jawaharlal Nehru. But, as we know, history rarely stays quite so neat. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a truly fascinating academic case study of India's foreign policy evolution. We'll be tracing the dramatic shift from those early days of independence, which were characterized by a highly normative approach to the world, to a deeply pragmatic, unsentimental, and even aggressive geopolitical stance under Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in the 1970s. This is going to be a structured, comprehensive lecture-style overview, perfect for university students or really anyone fascinated by the intense geopolitics of the Cold War. And to ensure complete objectivity, we're going to rely entirely on the historical record to understand exactly how and why this profound transformation happened. Let's actually start with this incredibly provocative self-assessment from Indira Gandhi herself. She once described her father, India's first prime minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, as a saint who strayed into politics, while calling herself a tough politician. Now, in the context of Indian political history, that is an absolutely staggering statement. Nehru had built the modern Indian state on these lofty, democratic, idealistic principles. So for his own daughter and successor to dismiss that approach as merely straying into politics, that's a stark, undeniable repudiation of his entire worldview. But it perfectly sets the thematic stage for us today by highlighting the sheer contrast between her father's idealism and her own ruthless pragmatism.
Here is our syllabus for today's explainer. We're going to move from international relations theory to historical application, then deconstruct the Soviet alliance, examine India's regional actions, and finally wrap up with the systemic pivot in the 1980s under Rajiv Gandhi.
Okay, let's dive right into our first section and lay down the theoretical framework that is going to anchor our entire analysis of this pivotal era. To truly grasp what happened during this period, we first need to define a crucial specialist term, hard realism. This is a lineage of political thought that stretches all the way back to Thucydides in ancient Greece, right up to modern theorists like John Mearsheimer. Basically, hard realism postulates that a state's ultimate safety relies entirely on maximizing its own capabilities. Why? Because we live in an anarchic world. There is no global 911 to call when a nation is attacked. So states are forced into a recurring, never-ending struggle for wealth and power simply to survive. Under this framework, all actions are justified by cold, hard reasons of state and the pursuit of regional hegemony, rather than any sense of international morality or ethics. And this comparison brilliantly illustrates the exact paradigm shift we are examining. Under Nehru, India's approach was liberal and normative. In practice, this meant relying heavily on United Nations diplomacy, constantly asserting a moral high ground, and prioritizing global anti-colonial solidarity. It was very much about how the world should be. But Indira Gandhi replaced this with a highly expedient, power-centric focus. She was unprincipled in the classical realist sense, meaning she deliberately discarded those idealistic sentiments in favor of rational choice, state capability, and tangible power differentials. She focused entirely on how the world actually was. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand that Indira Gandhi's realist turn didn't just happen in a vacuum. It was directly catalyzed by intense domestic vulnerability when she first took power around 1966. India was facing a deeply faction-ridden political landscape, 3 years of severe drought, and near-famine conditions. The country was humiliatingly reliant on U.S. food aid. Literally, it was a ship-to-mouth existence where the Indian population was waiting for American agricultural ships to arrive just to avoid starvation. This gave Washington immense political leverage over New Delhi. Furthermore, immense international pressure forced a drastic devaluation of the Indian rupee. This incredible internal weakness, combined with the embarrassing reliance on foreign powers, fostered in Indira Gandhi a deep-seated, pragmatic need to secure India's strategic autonomy at all costs. She essentially vowed to never let the Indian state be that vulnerable again. So, keeping that mindset in view, let's move to Section 2 and examine the primary historical case study that tests this realist framework, the massive geopolitical crisis of 1971. What you're seeing here is a timeline of a rapid cascade of global events that basically forced India to radically recalibrate its security posture. The rigid, predictable, bipolar world of the early Cold War was fracturing fast. In 1969, the Soviets and the Chinese clashed violently on their border. This mattered immensely to India because it meant the communist bloc was no longer a monolith. It was cracking, creating a dangerous new fluidity in global alliances. And simultaneously, the US and China were secretly moving toward reconciliation, which completely altered the balance of power in Asia.
As documented in our source material, this secret US-China rapprochement led by Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger was actually facilitated by Pakistan, and this created a dense, frankly terrifying geopolitical triangle for New Delhi. At the exact same time, Pakistan's military crackdown in East Pakistan was driving a staggering 10 million refugees across the border into India. This created an enormous economic and social burden that legitimately threatened to break the Indian state. Yet, because Pakistan was America's crucial conduit to Beijing, both the US and China firmly backed Pakistan. India suddenly found itself completely cornered and entirely isolated on the world stage.
Finding the US and China completely aligned with Pakistan, India executed what can only be described as a masterpiece of realpolitik. In August 1971, India signed the Treaty of Peace, Friendship, and Cooperation with the Soviet Union. The shock value of this moment really cannot be overstated. A famously non-aligned post-colonial democracy was officially allying itself with a massive communist superpower. But you have to remember, this wasn't about communist ideology. It was a strictly tactical shield. India urgently needed a superpower guarantor to ensure a steady flow of military supplies and, crucially, to explicitly preempt any potential Chinese intervention while India prepared to deal with the overwhelming crisis in East Pakistan, a crisis that very quickly erupted into the Indo-Pak War of December 1971. Now, at the time, global critics screamed that this treaty was an absolute abandonment of India's foundational doctrine of non-alignment. But we need to define non-alignment carefully here. It is not simply strict, passive neutrality. Rather, it is a deliberate posture of avoiding formal military blocs, specifically to maintain strategic autonomy. So, the big question, was it a betrayal of Indian ideals? Well, a hard realist would argue absolutely not. A realist views the 1971 treaty as a purely necessary maneuver to protect national survival. If non-alignment ultimately means not being dictated to by foreign powers, then securing a temporary alliance to survive a three-front threat is the ultimate realization of strategic autonomy.
Let's move along to our third section and dissect the structural anatomy of this resulting Indo-Soviet relationship, which proved to be remarkably steady, especially compared to Moscow's incredibly turbulent ties with other third-world nations like Egypt or Ghana. We can essentially break down this alliance into three distinct pillars: security, economics, and diplomacy. Notice that this relationship was driven entirely by shared, practical interests against Western containment. The diplomatic and security ties were fairly obvious, but the economic pillar was equally pragmatic. The Soviets helped build massive Indian steel mills and heavy engineering plants, and, crucially, they allowed for rupee-based debt repayment. To a developing nation, this was a massive game-changer. India didn't have to spend its precious limited US dollar reserves to buy heavy industry. They could trade in their own currency, preserving their foreign exchange. Add to that the UN Security Council veto protection provided by Moscow, and you have a highly functional reciprocal partnership. And just look at the staggering figure of 80% shown here. This highlights the absolute overwhelming depth of the security relationship. The Soviet Union gave India unparalleled access to modern weaponry and defense industry technology on highly preferential terms. It was a level of military hardware sharing that literally no Western nation was willing to offer New Delhi at that time. But it begs the question, why did this alliance survive and thrive when so many other Soviet partnerships collapsed in disaster? It's a brilliant irony, really. A communist superpower and a massive democracy succeeded together purely because they completely ignored each other's domestic ideologies. Moscow prioritized state-to-state relations and refrained from interfering in India's domestic politics or pushing any kind of communist agenda on the ground. On the flip side, India's strong bureaucratic state, its civilian-controlled military, and its institutionalized democracy provided a stable anchor that simply didn't care about Soviet authoritarianism at home. Ultimately, their mutual, hardcore realist need to counter the emerging US-China-Pakistan axis is what cemented the bond. Let's transition to our fourth section. Following India's incredibly decisive military victory in 1971, which resulted in the dismantling of East Pakistan and the creation of Bangladesh, we observe India actively applying its newfound power in its immediate neighborhood. This brings us to another key specialist term for this era, the Indira Doctrine.
Emulating the American Monroe Doctrine, this concept epitomized the realist principle of seeking ultimate security through regional hegemony. It was a bold aspiration that flatly opposed the presence of any external powers, whether American or Chinese, in South Asia or the Indian Ocean, unless those powers explicitly acknowledged Indian predominance and deferred entirely to New Delhi's security interests. And India aggressively moved to consolidate this sphere of influence. We see this in the 1972 Simla Agreement with Pakistan, which strictly insisted on bilateral conflict resolution without any foreign mediation whatsoever. We see it most vividly in the 1974 and 1975 annexation of Sikkim into the Indian Union. That maneuver was swift, unapologetic, and executed with absolute military precision to remove a strategic buffer state. We also see it in India's willingness to use trade blockades to subdue Nepal's economic independence and its naval and diplomatic interventions in Sri Lankan insurgencies. This was raw, unvarnished power politics at play. And perhaps the absolute most dramatic display of this hard realism was in May 1974. The underground nuclear test at Pokhran, though officially labeled a peaceful nuclear explosive, was the ultimate realist maneuver. Behind a strict wall of secrecy, India developed this capability not just for defense, but to forcibly demand international recognition. The global reaction was severe, to say the least. Crushing sanctions and decades of nuclear isolation quickly followed. But the Indira Gandhi administration was entirely willing to pay that immense international cost just to prove its formidable technological, scientific, and state capability to the world. However, as our academic sources point out, it is absolutely critical to assess the limits of this strategy. Many scholars argue India actually fell short of achieving true sustainable hard realism during this era. Why? Because the leadership under Indira Gandhi often focused much more on centralizing personal and dynastic power rather than building comprehensive, institutionalized national strength. Crucially, the government heavily neglected to cultivate soft power. By relying so heavily on tangible military might and political maneuvering, India's smaller neighbors began to deeply resent this heavy-handedness. This created long-term regional friction rather than fostering a cohesive, cooperative economic bloc in South Asia. This brings us to our fifth and final section. We're transitioning now to the mid-1980s, where global shifts began to systematically dismantle the foundations of this Cold War strategy under a brand new Prime Minister, Rajiv Gandhi. In the 1980s, the geopolitical tectonic plates shifted rapidly beneath everyone's feet. Mikhail Gorbachev's rise to power in 1985 and his subsequent outreach to the United States initiated a massive thaw in the Cold War. Suddenly, the strategic leverage India had held for so long as a prominent non-aligned power, playing the Soviets against the West, began to rapidly dwindle. The Soviet Union was visibly declining, its economy was stagnating, and Rajiv Gandhi quickly realized that India's strategic posture had to adapt to this new, fast-approaching reality. Rajiv Gandhi recognized a really vital, if somewhat jarring, truth. After spending 2 decades locked into the Soviet economic ecosystem, the old paradigm of an autarkic, state-controlled economy reliant on Soviet-heavy industry was essentially dead. Transforming India's economy for the 21st century meant requiring cutting-edge information technology, foreign direct investment, and significantly expanding global trade. These were crucial resources that a declining, highly bureaucratic Soviet petrostate simply could not provide. Therefore, to ensure its future power and survival, India had to pragmatically step right out of its comfort zone, recalibrate its approach to China, and begin serious, sustained economic engagement with the West. As we conclude this explainer, I want to leave you with this final, provocative question to ponder. Did Indira Gandhi's era of hard realism actually build a lasting institutional foundation for Indian power? Or did it merely serve as a temporary tactical shield for an unsustainable economic and political system, making those radical transformations of the 1990s absolutely inevitable? It's a fascinating debate that sits at the very heart of modern international relations history. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the history behind the headlines.